Okay, we'll begin over here in today's Rambam, in the third parak of today's Rambam, Hilchos Shabbos, Perik Hey, Halacha Yud Beis. Zok the Rambam Azeh, Leitin Adam Kli Menukiv Mali Shemen Al Pi Haner, B'shvil Sheyehi Menativ. A person has a candle burning, so you shouldn't put an additional vessel full of oil, and that should drip into the burning candle. Same thing, B'Leimali Kairo Shemen B'Yitnenem B'Sadad Ner. Similar idea. He says, Gzeira Shema Yikach Min HaShemen Shebekli, because it's a Gzeira that he might take from the Shemen, from the oil in the Keli, that's on the side, Shahud Lagbay. I'm sorry, Gzeira Shimach Yikach Min HaShemen Shebekli, Sharili Nimas Baner, being that the separate Keli is not part of, it's not connected to the Ner, so it's not disgusting in a person's eyes, so a person might take that oil and use it for something else. The asr lahanis b'Shabbos min hashemen shehud lakbei. It's asr to be nen etavana on Shabbos from oil that was used to be lit from it. Vafilu kavsa hanir, even if the candle is already extinguished. Vafilu notaf minan, even if it dripped out of the candle. B'mpnei shehu muktze machmas isur. It's muktze because of the isur. Being that this was oil that a candle was burning from it, so it's asr to take from the oil the candle is burning from it. Good, so that's the halacha. In Kitzur, the halacha is, I have a candle burning on Shabbos. I want to take oil and put it in a separate keli, and that oil is going to drip into the candle that's burning. So this is asur to do because it's muktze machmas isur. Azay zok the Rambam. Okay, you read the Rambam quickly, and you don't realize that the Rambam just said his opinion differently than all of the Rishonim in this issue. And I want to just quickly go through the different, some of the basic shittas over here and see what's the chiddush of the Rambam. This is be'emes a Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos, Tav Chav Tes Amud Beis, Layikiv Odom Shvei Feres Shel Beitza V'Yim La'eno Shemen. Don't make a hole in an egg, fill it with oil, V'Yitnen Al Pi Haner, B'Shvil Shetehem Min HaTefes, in order that it should drip into the candle. Okay, that's the halacha. The shaila is, what's the reason for this halacha? What's the reason for this isur? So I want to give you a little bit of a quick hakdama to understanding, again, the shittas about the reason for this isur. In order to understand that, we have to look at a din in Masechta Beya. Masechta Beya Chav Beis Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Hanoisen shemen baner, a person who adds oil into a candle, there's talking about Yom Tov, chayiv mishum mavir, you're chayiv because you're burning, you're adding fire on Shabbos. If you take oil out of a candle on Shabbos, or there it's in Yom Tov and Shabbos is the same thing for this. If you take oil out of a candle on Yom Tov or on Shabbos, the Gemara says you're chayiv because of mechaber. That's an important shtickle Gemara. The Gemara is saying, again, I have a candle burning, or have a flame burning in oil, and I take out some of the oil. The Gemara says, you're chayiv mishum mechaber. Now, mechaber is an isur d'oraisa. Remember, the Rambam said that you can't have that oil dripping into the candle because it's muktze machmas isur. Muktze machmas isur is an isur d'rabbanan. So how do we get from the d'oraisa of mechaber to muktze machmas isur? So, what is this din? I have a flame burning, and I take out a little oil on the bottom. There's a whole cup of oil. I take out a little bit of oil, an ounce of oil. The Gemara says I'm chaim mishum mechaber. Why? Why is it mechaber? Right now, I'm not being mechaber anything. So there's a big machlekes harishonim. Tosfos right over there in Beit Chav Beis Amud Aleph says, "Eini ratza leimer mipnei shemimahir kibui, deloi have ele gram kibui, v'gram kibui b'yom tiv shari. Afal pi shemimahir kibuya." Ubeshabbos nami nichayev. Tosfos says, what's the problem? I have a candle filled with oil, and it's going to burn for 2 hours, 3 hours. Now I took out some oil, it's only going to burn for 1 hour. So I was geirim that the kibui happens an hour earlier. Says Tosfos, that's not a problem. That's called gram kibui, and gram kibui is not an isur. Definitely, by Yom Tov b'chal not an isur, and Shabbos not an isur d'oraisa. There's a whole sugya Masechta Shabbos. If there's a fire burning in your house and you put kalim of water around the fire, it's okay. That's also gram kibui. So Tosfos, gram kibui is not a problem. So what's the problem if I take out a little oil from the keli and now it's going to light for 1 hour instead of 2. Says Tosfos, the only problem is Elahainu Taima, the Bo'isa Shoshu mistapik mimena mechabik tzas umechase oirei the leyochi lanhure kulahai ki kashem and muad bener. Tosfos has a big chidush, and that is if I have a wick and there's a lot of oil in the candle holder, that is, so then the fire burns strong. If there's only a little oil, if there's less oil, then it's a weaker fire. So says Tosfos, that's the problem. The problem is when I take out a little bit of oil, I'm immediately mechabe. I take away from the toikif of the burning of the candle. Therefore, says Tosfos, what would it be if it's a candle, not oil? If there's a long wax candle and I cut off the bottom of the candle, the bottom piece of the candle, that wouldn't be a problem, because I'm only making that it won't light for 2 hours, it'll light for 1 hour. It's not doing something automatically because the wick is not connected to the piece of the candle on the bottom. So Tosfos' shita is, and this is what's important for us, Tosfos' shita is, there's no issur of gram kibui. If I take away oil and therefore it's going to light for an hour less, that's not a problem. The problem is when I'm taking away the oil, it has an immediate effect on the wick, on the light, on the flame, that it doesn't light as strongly. That's Tosfos. Says the Rosh over there in Beya, says the Rosh, not true. He says, I'll bring you a raya. The raya from this particular Rambam we're learning today, from the Mishnah Shabbos Daf Choftes, where here it says that even if you have a separate keli with oil, and the separate oil is dripping in to the candle of the oil, it's also to do that Shema Yistapik manner. You might take out some oil. Now it's a davar hapashut that if I have a separate keli and there's oil in that separate keli and that's dripping into a candle, and then I remove some of the oil from that separate keli, that's not going to have an immediate effect on the burning candle. It must be because of gram kibui, because being that all that oil is going to come in to the candle, so now and I'm taking out some oil, now it's going to burn for less time. Says the Rosh, not like Tosfos. Really, gram kibui is asur midiraisa. If a candle is going to burn for an hour and I take away some oil, now it's only going to burn for a half hour, it's also midiraisa. In the Gemara Masechta Shabbos, it says gram kibui is not also midiraisa, and if there's a flame burning in the house, I'm allowed to surround the area of the flame with the kalim of water, and ultimately it will put out the fire. That's because there I'm never touching or handling the actual fire or the oil. I'm being goyrim kibui from a davar mibachutz, from something outside. I'm putting around kalim of water. I never touch the oil. I never touch the candle. That type of gram kibui, the Gemara says, is okay. But if I'm taking away oil from a fire, or I'm taking away a part of the candle from the fire, and therefore making that now the fire is going to burn for less time, that is a din mechabe, and that's an isur deirais. That is the sheet of the Rosh. So b'kitzer, we have here a machlokes between the Tosfos and the Rosh, and that is, what's the halacha when I am goyrim that a fire won't burn for an hour, it'll burn for a half hour, by taking away a little of the oil, or by taking away a little bit of the candle. Is it a problem? So the Rosh says, yes, it's a problem of gram kibui, and that's a din of mechaber, nisur deraisa. Tosfos says that's not a problem. What's the problem? The problem is when you're taking away some of the oil, you're immediately making the flame less, and that's the problem of kibui. That is the machlekes of Tosfos and the Rosh. In Hilchas Yom Tov, in Tovkuf Yudala, the Alter Rebbe brings, the Alter Rebbe paskins, bepashtus, like the shita of Rosh. He says you have to be machmer, like the shita of the Rosh. He talks about cutting a candle, and he says it's usher, because you're goyrim kibui, and he says there in Tovkuf Yudala, in Kundas Achron, kenu das harosh, v'tur b'shulchan aruch, u'bevadai roi lahachmir b'shel teira. V'chein posku, marshal, v'taz, etc., etc. So the Alter Rebbe paskins, like the shita of the Rosh, that when you're making a candle burn for less time, it's a din of gram kibui, which is also deraisa. That's in Hilchas Yom Tov. In Hilchas Shabbos, in Siman Reish Samach Hey, the Alter Rebbe brings this din from today's Rambam and the din of the Mishnah, and he writes the following: Aser litin keli menukav malei shaman al pi haneir. You can't put a keli that has a hole in it and is full of oil by a candle kadesh shaman medaftiv kol shah, that the oil should drip in. Shema yistapik ma'shemen should be kli, because a person might take some of the oil. The yesh baza isur mishum mechabe. This is an isur because of mechabe. Shalideken yichbe haner bizman koriv yoiser. Mimloi hoyu mistapik menu klum, v'hoyu noitif kuli lotech haner. So again, I have the second keli and there's oil dripping into my candle. If I take from that oil, says the Alter Rebbe, that is a din of mechabe. Of course, following the sheet of the Rosh, that gram kibui is a isur deraisa of mechabe. Says the Alter Rebbe weiter, again, Reish Samach Esif Alif, V'af leho oimrim, demuter lachtich, nir shel shayva hadeilig b'yomtiv, ve'in bazem mishum mechabe. In other words, Shittas HaTosfos, even those who say that there's no din of gram kibui, hoyil b'shar shachoitech mimenu, einoi mache eire klal. Because when you're cutting the candle, you're not immediately lessening the light. V'af al pisha geirem le'likovis b'mehera in b'kachlum, kameshi is barba siman tov kuf yudalid. Even though the Alter Rebbe doesn't really bring this shita, only in the Muktze Sachra. But according to Shittas HaTosfos, the gram kibui is not a problem. So why is it a problem over here by this little keli on the side? Says the Alter Rebbe, a beer that's taken from the Maharshal. He says, "Mikol mokim chosheshin shema yimalech v'yitel mehaner kol hashemen im hakli oy b'lei hakli v'nimtza mach ha'ir haner b'shas nitilosoi v'yesh b'zeh mishum mechabel divrei hakol." In other words, I might take that whole keli all together, take the whole thing with all the shemen away, and then I have a problem because then there's takia oninian of an immediate lessening of the light of the candle, and that's a problem of kibui l'divrei hakol. That is what the Alter Rebbe says. So in other words, the Alter Rebbe says like this: what's the pshat of the isur of this Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos Daf Chof Tes? Today's din in Rambam. What's the pshat of the isur? I'm going to put shemen into a keli, and that keli is dripping into a candle, and now I might take some of the shemen away. So like the Rosh, the gram kibui is also midiraisa. That's a din of mechabe. So obviously it's also because you might take a drop of shemen, and that's called gram kibui. Now it's not going to light for 2 hours; it's going to light for 1 hour. That's an issur deraisa. And even according to Tosfos, that gram kibui is not an issur deraisa. Nevertheless, there's an issur because you might take the entire keli with all of the oil away, immediately lessening the light of the candle. It's again an issur of kibui deraisa. Those are the two shitas those are the two ways that the Alter Rebbe explains this issur of the Mishnah of a person might take some shemen from the keli. Both is because of the issur mechabe. If you hold gram kibui is asur midiraisa, because being that you're taking away a little oil, that's an automatic mechabe. If you hold like Tosfos, gram kibui is not asur midiraisa, the problem is you might take away the entire keli with the oil, and then you're lessening the strength of the flame. Weiter kibui. But in the Rambam today we learned, the Rambam didn't mention kibui at all. The Rambam says, you might take some oil, and that is muktze machmas isur, because that oil is muktze for the isur. Says the Alter Rebbe in the Kuntres Achrin over there in Reish Samachei. He says, in the Rambam Perikei, Shenosan tam acher, mishum muktze machmas isur. The Rambam says in his own reason, muktze machmas isur. It's a drabonon, it's a halacha of muktze. Ayin shom belechem Mishnah, says the Alter Rebbe, look into the lechem Mishnah, shepirush deleshayakan kibui. The Rambam holds there's no kibui. V'hainu kidas hamatirin b'simin tov kuf yudalit. In other words, the Rambam is paskening like Tosfos that there's no din gram kibui. The chazer by mimashakosu b'pirush HaMishnah. The Alter Rebbe is ma'ir that the Rambam is being chazer and Sefer Hayad in what he himself wrote in Pirush HaMishnah, Masechta Shabbos and the Mishnah Chof Tes. The Rambam said it is mitzad kibui. That's not a problem. The Rambam many times is chazer in the Sefer Hayad from what he wrote in the Pirush HaMishnah, which was when he was much younger. That's not an issue. Kumtes, that the Rambam learns like this. The Rambam learns there's no Yisur gram kibui. The fact that I'm making a candle burn for 1 hour instead of 2, that's not an Yisur deraisa. And the Rambam doesn't want to accept the other vart that the Alter Rebbe said, b'shem the Maharshal, and that is that you might take the entire keli and therefore you might weaken the fire. The Rambam doesn't say that's a gzeira, who says we're geyser, you're going to take the entire keli and weaken the fire. That's not an issue. So therefore, the Rambam said the problem is you might take some oil, and that is usur because it's muktze machmas isur, because that oil is the oil of the candle is burning from it. That oil is muktze machmas isur. Says the Alter Rebbe Tzarachin on the Rambam. Tzarachiyun ma'ishna michitim shezodron bekarka How is this different than the halacha that we have in Gemara? That if a person plants chitim, wheat in the ground, sh'af shehichtzam li'isur, dahainu lizriya, sheyishrishu sham, v'yesru mishum isur tlisha. A person planted something in the ground. What's going to happen? This is going to get roots, and then it's going to be usur to pick it. Afilu hachi kedem shishrishu, dadayin inban isur tlisha, loy havu muktze. If I plant seeds of wheat in the ground before they take roots and I want to then remove it, it's not muktze. Even though by putting it into the ground, I designated it that this is going to become rooted and then there's going to be Yisur Tlisha, but until it does, it's not Asur. V'hochinami hashemen shelayorad adayin l'neir lama yeyaseh, says the Alter Rebbe. What's the difference? Just like when I take those little pieces of those seeds and I put them into the ground. So even though my intention is that those seeds are going to become rooted in the ground, and then they won't be able to be, and then it will be usher to be toilish. But nevertheless, until they become rooted in the ground, it's not a problem. So the Alter Rebbe asks on the Rambam, when I have that oil that's dripping into the other keli, so when it will drip into the other keli, so then it will become Muktze machmas isur, because then the candle is burning from the flame of that oil. But now beforehand, it's not burning now beforehand. This is a separate keli, so it's not Muktze machmas isur. So why would it be Muktze machmas isur before it dripped into the second keli? Because if a person is going to take out of the oil when it's still in the first keli, not in the keli that's burning, that the wick is burning in, so at this point the fire is not burning from this oil. So at this point it's not Muktze machmas isur, says the Alter Rebbe Tzarachin and the Rambam. Why over here this is called Muktze machmas isur? And the Alter Rebbe gives, it says that the doichik leimer a certain pshat, and then he gives another pshat the doichik leimer, and ultimately the Alter Rebbe leaves this as a tzorich iyun on the Rambam, and the Alter Rebbe Taka doesn't mention that shita of the Rambam in the Pnim of the Shulchan Aruch as a tzad, as a reason for this issue. So what we have over here in Sikum, we have over here the Alter Rebbe gave us two reasons in the Pnim of the Shulchan Aruch: silent asa rosh, silent asa faces. Now, if gram kibui is asur midiraisa, so then the Alter Rebbe said it's pashut why this is asur. As soon as you're going to take some oil from the keli on top, that's gram kibui is asur midiraisa. According to Shitas HaTosfos, gram kibui is not asur midiraisa. So the issue is you might remove the entire keli of oil, and at that point you're immediately weakening the flame. It's weiter a gather of kibui. And in the Kuntus Achron, the Alter Rebbe mentions the Rambam from today's Rambam, where the Rambam says that it's like din of Muktze, has nothing to do with kibui b'chlal. And the Lach Mishnah said it's because the Rambam paskins that gram kibui is takamuter, like the Rosh. I'm sorry, like Tosfos. And by says the Rambam doesn't accept that word of the Marshal or Gzeira that you might remove the entire keli, and therefore the Rambam said that it's a word of Muktze machmas isur. And the Rebbe is asking on the Rambam that l'chura we see that this is not called Muktze machmas isur. When you put something in a situation that is going to be Muktze machmas isur, it doesn't already attain that level of Muktze machmas isur, and the Alter Rebbe lost us by a tzorech iyun. The Alter Rebbe leaves a tzorech iyun, so I don't know that it's perhaps silly to start trying to think how to frame for a tzorech iyun of the Alter Rebbe. But just a thought of a difference. What was the Rambam thinking? How was the Rambam thinking that here there is a Muktze machmas isur? So when I have those little carrot blach, when I have those seeds and I'm putting them to the ground, so right now there's nothing that's Muktze. There's nothing at all that's Muktze, because there's nothing that is rooted in the ground. So I take a seed and I put it into the ground. When it will sprout roots, there will be a Muktze machmas isur. Mashenkin over here. So I have a keli of shemen that has a wick burning in it, and therefore that shemen is already Muktze machmas isur. Now I'm taking an additional keli of shemen, and I'm putting it next to the first one, and it's dripping into the first one. So is it possible the Rambam now looks at this second keli as an extension of the first keli? It's all one shemen. There's a wick. There's a wick that's burning, and that's burning in all of the shemen that's going to fuel this wick. So there's the shemen that the wick is sitting in, and there's the shemen that's funneling into it. Somehow all of that becomes one big body of shemen, which is Muktze machmas isur. If so, perhaps there's a chiluk. Because by the seeds, there is no Muktze Machmas Isser. So I want to create Muktze Machmas Isser. But with what? It's not, there's no Muktze Machmas Isser yet. So it's gonna become Muktze Machmas Isser. Perhaps in the Rambam's mind, being that there's already a Muktze Machmas Isser, which is oil, and this oil becomes an extension to that oil, together of Haktzo, so maybe it all becomes one big Muktze Machmas Isser. And the Alter Rebbe didn't agree with that. The Alter Rebbe says, hey, being that Lepoyo, the oil that's in the side keli is not yet part of the oil in the keli of the wick. So therefore, there's no reason that it should be Muktze Machmas Isser because it's going to come into that keli. It's just like the seeds. And perhaps the Rambam holds, no, it's not like the seeds. Because over here it becomes one big oil. The oil that's going to come into it is already considered connected with the oil that's there. But what we have over here is these three different Eifanim and three Shitas to learn this halacha, and the Rambam's Shita, that it is takya miyusud on the din of Muktze Machmas Isur.